you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. This is actually a request, came my way through an email. They want to talk about the effects of working a double shift. Now, again, I am familiar with the double shift. I know what that is, mandated or draft. Custody, definitely will go through that. Medical, which will have Connie on the line, who can definitely go through that. I don't know what they call it, whether it's mandating the person to work another shift or they're being drafted. I'm sure she'll have the terminology for that. But I'm familiar with the 8-hour shifts. That's the only shifts I've ever worked on. So basically, we have to do 40 hours, which is spread out through 5 days. And if you get hit, the 8 becomes 16 unless someone decides to come in a little bit earlier. I know for some places they work different shifts, 12-hour shifts. I'm only familiar with the 8-hour shifts, which can turn to 16. But I think the effect in the long run is still going to be the same thing as what me and Connie are going to discuss. We're going to talk about how it could affect you, how it could affect your family, how it could affect the facility, and how it could affect your job performance. But before we get into all that, Connie, what's going on?
Hello, Connie Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I am also the podcast host for the Fly Behind the Wall and Conversations with Connie. I am so looking forward to this discussion because I think that we assume or we take for granted, just how much time and how much sacrifice folks actually make working behind the wall, especially given our staffing shortages. So I look forward to us having this discussion.
Hey, Connie, before we go to a sponsor, I mentioned for us it could be mandated an extra shift or drafted. What's the term for medical?
Medical is mandation as well, because essentially they can't leave post anyway. If you're specifically, if you're a nurse and you're working a unit or and you don't have a replacement, like you can't leave. So you get mandated until someone else comes in or if we can find someone else.
Yeah, so I think as we have this discussion, we're going to be talking a lot about, again, how this affects our well-being, our mental health, our physical well-being, and again, how that can cross into our family life, but ultimately also the job too. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion, and I figured I would go right with custody and with medical, but I don't think they're the only people that could get mandated. I'm sure maintenance could also get mandated. Again, it varies, but for now, we'll hold the discussion to custody and medical. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Wow, stumbled there. Stumbled a little bit. It's all right, though. And when we come back from our sponsors, we'll talk about working doubles, and we'll try to keep this as quick as possible. That's the key. Try to hopefully keep it under 25 minutes. So, all right, guys, stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems.
Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description. And we are back. So, Connie, obviously you're familiar with doubles, and you said something right before we went to the sponsor about being understaffed. I think that's the key, what leads to getting mandated or drafted is that the fact that we're understaffed and we just don't have enough coverage. And I know that you may see a lot from the overnight shifts get mandated because the overnight shifts have to cross into a bigger shift. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that may work overnights. Now, for me, the shifts I'm familiar with would be like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and then having to work from 10 p.m., 6 a.m., and then go ahead and get drafted for the next shift and then leaving at 2 p.m. That's a hell of a double from 10 p.m. all the way to 2 p.m. One of the hardest doubles you can ever do. But again, that's what I'm familiar with the 8-hour shifts becoming then a 16-hour shift. What kind of shifts do we see when it comes from the medical personnel? Are they 12-hour shifts or?
So generally we have 8 to 4, 4 to 12, 12 to 8. In a hospital setting, you might see the 12-hour shifts a little more than we've seen in facilities. There are some facilities that run sort of like a hospital, so you may see some 12-hour shifts, but it has not been my experience to really have many 12-hour shifts that I've managed. Certainly the challenge in any of those shifts is by the time you've done your shift, you are usually exhausted. So going from your shift to working another shift right behind is usually very difficult. I mean, in addition to all the other things that come along with just you pushing your body to its limits. I know I did have the experience of some union sort of involvement, particularly because, you know, it becomes unsafe after you work 8 to 4, then 4 to 12, then possibly 12 to 8, you know. There was a limit placed on how many hours you could work consecutively, not necessarily how many times you could be mandated. And that's a difference.
Right. I know for some states, if it's emergency, they could push you at the most 20 hours. But as you're right, as to how many days in a row you could get stuck, I don't know if there's anything on that. I know there are some places that may give you a courtesy, if possible, if you're not under emergent situations, if you're not desperate, where if they know it's your Friday, they won't put you on that mandatory list. They won't put you on that drafted list. So you can kind of have that 2 days off, whatever it is. But again, that's on a schedule I'm familiar with. And that's the practices I'm familiar with. I'm sure some places they may not do that, or they just can't do that because they're understaffed all the time, that they may even need those people to come in on those extra days. So you don't even get to work a simple 5-hour or 5-day week. You know, it may go into, let's do 40 hours. So I don't know how, you know, everybody sets up their schedule, but it becomes very unpredictable. That's the key. So when you have an understaffed facility, the first thing that we notice is that your life is going to be very unpredictable. It becomes very hard for you to plan things because you don't know if the facility is going to need you. And when people take this profession, that is part of the sacrifice that they're willing to make, but it should be reasonable. Like all of a sudden, now that we're acting on desperation, we become overwhelmed and just, it's no longer reasonable because we can't balance the family life with the work life. And also our family starts to get mad at us because they know that there's a priority there. Like, I think even your family will understand a reasonable amount of overtime, and however you want to define reason, you know, maybe 1 a week could happen, you know, maybe, you know, but there are some facilities where people are working 4-5 times a week and not by choice. We're talking about, you know, being mandated, being drafted. That means that you're not choosing to work it. You happen to get hit. So, you know, as much as we want to keep a balance, sometimes when facilities are really understaffed and they're acting out of desperation, you can't maintain that balance because the facility it won't allow you to do that because they're like, well, you have to work. It's a priority. And if you don't work, you're going to be charged. You're going to be disciplined. And then you could start to see the stress on that employee when they have to call home and maybe say, hey, honey, I'm not coming home tonight. I apologize. And I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to make it to such and such's birthday party, even if it's my daughter's birthday party or the dinner that we had planned for tonight. I just can't do it. And your family starts wondering, like, man, who are you committed to? Are you committed to the job or are you committed to me? And it's tough because as you're sitting there and I'm trying to make plans with your family, or you're trying to make plans with your family and your loved ones, you can't, because you don't know if you're going to go to work and all of a sudden they're going to hit you. And it's like, damn, now I got to cancel another set of plans with the loved ones. I'm sure you've been through that too, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, so here's the thing. I feel like, you know, not every situation is just an understaffing issue, right? Sometimes it is all hell has broken loose and you just can't leave. And that's just a reality of the job. And I think that when we are transparent with our partners or with our families and let them know what really goes on behind the wall, it makes those conversations a little more digestible when you have to say, hey, babe, this is what happened. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it. I think one of the biggest things that we do see is that, especially with people who have children, you know, your children are waiting to see you. Your children want you to come home. You know, you may have made a promise. And I think the emotional distress that the parent feels when they have to make that call, I think we don't talk about that enough. Like, what does that feel like when you have to make the call? You are talking to your children and they're expecting you, but mommy's not coming home or daddy's not coming home tonight because they've been mandated. I mean, we'd like to say, like, you know, it's just part of the job, we could brush it off. But the reality is that it does have a significant impact on the relationship that you're trying to establish with your children and the relationship with your spouse, because your spouse is the one, or your partner is the one who's home dealing with the emotions that are coming from the child, right? Which then in turns impacts you when you finally do get home. You'd like to get home and get some sleep, but your spouse is like, hey, listen, we need to talk about this because this is what happened when you called last night. You know, I think we want to be as sensitive, I think, as managers that this happens, but our reality is that we are acting out of desperation many times, and you getting mandated is not something that we enjoy doing. One thing that we've done in facilities that I've worked in was we actually set up like a mandate list. So you know that today is a day you could get mandated, right? That way it's not like a surprise. It's not like, holy crap, but it's like, all right, it's 12 o'clock or it's 1:45. You know, we got a call from somebody. What number am I on that mandation list? You know, what's the likelihood that I will end up being mandated for the next shift? And I think that kind of helps because at least you're not caught by the surprise.
Yeah, you know what? We do that as well, rotation list, but it's kind of tough though when you're understaffed to begin with. So the list rotates pretty damn quick, you know, especially also if you're working overnights and it's that skeleton shift. So, you know, you always tend to be that 4 that's being called to the window and says, hey, just stand by for a little bit. We may need you. It's like, yeah, I was called yesterday. I know, but we have to hold 4 and we only have 4 on the shift right now. So, I mean, you know, but it's true, you know, but that is what you need to do when you have a healthy staff. You know, I mean, I'm talking about number wise, you should have a fair rotation and not the same people being pulled all the time. I mean, again, you don't want to overwhelm that staff. I mean, everybody, even rookies, yes, we all need to rest so we can be good the next day. And before we cross into the next part, because we talked really definitely, this is how definitely it affects family, the unpredictability, the family not understanding that, you know, yes, you have the job function, but they're looking for commitment too. And you wind up spending more time at the job because let's put it this way, even if you are home, you're not spending time with the family quality because you're tired. You're either sleeping most of the hours away, or even if you're trying to function, you're slow moving. You could be, you know, your mood could be, you know, all over the place because again, you know, you're not getting that right amount of sleep. You know, it's crazy, but some of us will do 16 hours, right? And then have to report to work for our normal 8, but we're only going to get like 3 or 4 hours of sleep because we may be an hour away from the facility or even more. So we're driving an hour and change just to get home, fighting just to stay awake, getting a power nap, and then having to come right back into it. And as I said, when you get home, you're not ready to entertain the family. You want to crash so you could, you know, recover some strength. And by the time you recover just a little bit of it, you're back to work again, going through the same grind. There's just not enough to balance that with, you know, the work with the family. Very hard. It is very, very hard. Now, crossing into the next step, because we're going to kind of just bullet this out, how that affects you, you know, as a person. I mean, yes, the unpredictability definitely is going to affect you, not knowing, am I going to go home tonight? I mean, I know some people, they don't realize how lucky they are to have a job that says at 4 o'clock they're able to go home, where when we get to that time, we're hoping that we get to go home. And every day we're hoping that we get to go home. We're hoping that we don't get that last minute call off, you know, where that used to frustrate me too, because that last minute call off to me was just so disrespectful to people that were there, the people that were expecting to come home. And guys, for the people that call off all the time, don't think that doesn't affect your peers. That affects your peers 100% because you're going to have to be replaced. And now you could have someone that's working their second or third double in a row. But how do you think, just doing those, getting caught up in that mandate, getting caught up in that draft like 3 or 4 times in a week, how do you think that also affects the person?
So the person is absolutely stressed. That person is probably on edge. You also have to think, what is that person doing in order to try to stay alert, right? So when you think of excess caffeine, or you think of drinking a Red Bull or whatever thing that they have out there to give you that energy boost, you think about the impact physically that it has on your heart, it has on your brain, has on your body, has the stressors on your body. Like, I feel like when you are that person who is being mandated and you're not getting sleep and you're certainly not eating properly, right? Because you're not on any particular routine. Those are all things that are overall impacting your health and your well-being, your mental state of mind, your emotional state of mind. When you're not eating right, you're not sleeping right, you're usually very irritable. And I think that's the thing that spills over into relationships with your colleagues. It spills over into your job functioning, your ability to actually engage with the inmate. You're not thinking de-escalation. You don't have time for this. You're on a short fuse at that point. And I think we have to acknowledge the impact that that kind of thing has. One thing I wanted to touch on, though, that you talked about, Tony, was, really like what happens, like once someone is mandated, and the person who called out. Like, for me, even though I think it's disrespectful for you to not call out within a certain amount of time, I also think about those people who I'm trying my best to get there. I'm trying to pull get the extra oomph for me to come in. I feel like there are those people who they don't want to call out because they know the impact, but they're also off of a double or maybe even a triple, And I think like sometimes we get to that point where like, I just don't have any more to give. And so, yes, there are some who I think abuse the system or who, just don't really give a crap. But I think there are some that really do say like, I want to get in there and I'm going to try my best to get there. And then we know driving tired is worse than driving drunk, right? I mean, the stats are out there. So that person, just to think they have to make that decision. Am I going to get behind the wheel just to try to make it? Because like you said, your commute could be an hour. Who knows how long you're going to have to just try to drive and stay alert just to get there. Even if you can get an easy post, and that's probably not going to happen. But, even if you could, the reality is that you're not in any position to really be effective.
Right. And that's very fair what you said. I like how we did that. So there are some that do abuse it. And at that point there, I don't think they realize how that affects the staffing that's already there. But you're right. There are some people that are all going through it right now. And I wake up sometimes like, man, I can't do it. I made the effort. I'm not gonna be able to do it today, and then call off. So you're right, 100%. I'm not looking at them. I'm looking at those who may decide that tonight I'm gonna go partying, and they know they're not coming to work the next day, But instead, they don't call out enough. They call out towards like the beginning of their shift, which doesn't give enough time for the shift before to hire for it. You know what I mean? Because believe it or not, when you call out, hopefully you call out in a way. Again, it's not a last minute thing. I'm talking about if you're not going to come in. Let's just do it that way. If you're not going to come in, don't wait till the last minute to call out, because when you do, then we can't organize anybody to come in. Now we have to force people to come in or force people to stay because, we haven't had a chance to invite people to want to take the overtime. So, having that little courtesy, knowing that I'm not going to come in, okay, I'll call out, very early in the day, as opposed to, I still got time to call out. So I'll wait and I'll wait and I'll wait. Again, because now what happens here is the moment you do call out, the people that thought they were going home are now stuck, again, we look for every minute on that clock to move forward. And eventually when we think we're getting ready to go home, we're right by that door. And all of a sudden, right when you go hearing the radio, hey, Gangi, go back to the window real quick. Oh man, I was out the door. And, that's why, it becomes very, very frustrating because it does actually build a little bit of a separation between our peers, because it's like, I know you're going to call out, man. I know I'm going to get screwed with another shift, and some people may want the overtime, but some people don't. Some people actually do want to go home and do want to spend time with their family. One of the things I also wanted to mention was sometimes we also feel that we're giving our families false promises. You know, sometimes I mentioned that, you know, sometimes we want to tell the family it's okay, it's not going to happen again, it's a one-time thing, but it gets to the point where it's like, I can't say that anymore because I've missed out on too many events, you know? So at that point, it's about trying to explain that, you know what, it could happen again. And at that point, either you're good with it or you're not, you know, but that's why a lot of people leave too. A lot of people leave this profession because they start to look at, you know, am I able to balance this? And I'm not. I'm losing my family here. My family's not understanding what's going on. They don't understand the pressure, and I have to make a choice, and I'm going to choose my family, and they wind up taking off. And that could have been a very good employee, someone that you want, but unfortunately we overwhelm them. We put too much burden on them, and they've been burned out. So that to me, again, we need more incentives to keep people in this profession, to invite people into this profession. And really all this comes from the fact that we don't have enough of the right incentives to bring people in or to keep people. And that overtime, that draft, that being mandated becomes just a way of life. Very unpredictable, but it sucks to not be able to commit to anything with your family and just say, well, I'm going to try. And then all of a sudden your family starts looking at you like you're a man of false promises. Your kid's not understanding and be like, Daddy makes all these promises and never shows. And again, that affects your employee morale too, because when you're at work, you're like, I like what you mentioned before with the inmates. You're not thinking about the work. You're thinking about, man, what am I going to tell my family? You know, or man, I failed to be at another event for my family. You know, I'm going to hear about that when I get home. Your mind's just not in the now. It's focused on trying to keep together what's outside. And I don't think a lot of people understand that, but it adds to the stress because now it's not just the stress of the job. I got the stress of the home life. I have no escape. I got the jobs killing me. I got my family life falling apart, and they're all interconnected. So as much as we want to try to keep things separated, sometimes things bleed in. That's why I said sometimes you can keep things separated, but it's only if the job allows it. Now you cross into something which before we get to closing we could touch on, and maybe we could give from a medical perspective as well as a custody perspective, but you started talking about job performance, you know, mood stability, stuff like that, being irritable, if you will, and how that could affect how you do your job, the overall safety and security of the facility. So can you go into that a little bit more?
So, I mean, we know that stress impacts all aspects of your life. It impacts all aspects of your health. And so when you are constantly mandated, you're dealing with the stress of the job, you're dealing with whether it's the administrative stress or the stress of the prison politics, the stress of the inmates, or whatever that is, right? Like your reality is that level of stress, the impact of that stress doesn't just dissipate. That stress goes everywhere. And so, you know that you're not sleeping, you're not eating well, you're certainly not dieting and exercise. So things that would promote wellness and that would promote positive ways of coping with certain stressors, like you just can't, right? It's hard to compartmentalize when you have the stress at work and the stress at home. Right? For many people, being able to disconnect from work and go home to a happy home environment, that makes all the difference. But if you know that you're on the brink of divorce because of the impact of the job, right? Because we know the divorce numbers are really high for corrections. I want to say there was somewhere at like 46.7% was like the divorce rate for corrections officers. That's a very high number when you think about like what happens. So now you have no outlet. And so the things you start to use to cope, I think spills over. So people start to drink, they start to use drugs, like those things aren't helpful. But then when you get back into workspace, you're really no good to no one because one, you're not thinking straight. You're not focused. You can't concentrate. You are irritable. You're hungry. You're tired. You're all these things that make it very difficult for any human being to be effective. Or even if you're working to some level of, I don't even want to say proficiency, but even if you are able to work, the chances or likelihood of human error are much more greater. And so that report that you were supposed to write just don't even sound right. Someone's going to pick that up and they're like, what is this person talking about? Or I think on the medical side, right, we're tasked with meds, we're tasked with, vitals. I mean, all the things that are almost like second nature to us. when that stress is there, sometimes like you make a simple mistake that could be catastrophic. And it's not because you're not competent. It could just be that you are overworked and you are burnt out.
Yeah, just not having the energy to give 100%. And it's funny, we don't have that energy. Maybe 50% is 100%. Maybe 40% is 100%. It's funny. Two things say before we come to an end with the discussion was, one thing is, I'm going to take the guess that it's 47.7. You added that point. I was like, wait a second, is that a guess? Because that sounds pretty damn accurate. Whatever that number was, 46.7 or
yeah, I think it's 46.7. I was reading something and I remember saying, oh my God, that's such a big number. And I want to say it's 46.7.
Yeah, like he said, I'm going to take a bit of a guess. I'm thinking okay, like a round number, like 46%. You're like 46.7. I was like, that's a guess. And then you're like, and by the way, let me mention something, Tony. I think I don't know if that's the first time you ever did that. You know what I mean? But hey, do that more often. That's what you should be doing, Connie. You know what I mean? I don't think you've ever said that before. I actually looked behind me to see who the hell Tony was. You know what I mean? Like, hey, who's Tony? No, but yeah, that was good. That was good. We're moving up in the world. But just one last thing. So guys, for the people that are being mandated draft, we know it hurts. We know you're going through something. And I wish I could always talk good about the profession, but this is the one thing here right now, especially because of the times we're in with the COVID stuff. I know it's a lot worse than it ever was. And facilities were already under stress. So now it's a lot more because a lot of people can't come to work because of the COVID stuff. So I want you to know, I don't know if it carries a lot of weight, but at least from this level, you're appreciated. I mean, I don't know if people see it, but we know it. We live it. We see it. So don't think that's not appreciated. But I want people just to understand what a simple double can do, how it could be overwhelming, how it could affect the family eventually if they just keep on coming, where, you got facilities that are just not properly staffed, how it could affect the morale, how it could ultimately affect the safety and security of the facilities. That's what we're talking about here. You don't have enough energy to do the job. That's not good for here. You got to be able to give this job 110%. I don't even have enough to give it 50% at this point, let alone try to push my way up to 110%. And also, sometimes I feel that when the agencies are mandating people, it's really about the number, not the quality. Quantity, actually, over quality. It's like, well, we just need somebody for that post. But now the problem here, and one last thing before we go into closing, is that when you mandate someone multiple days in a row, and they do mess up, or they do fail, agency's going to write them up. Agency's going to bury them. And they don't care if you worked 3 days doubles in a row or 4 days. I'm talking about if you got drafted, not because if you volunteered. That's a whole different ball game. But they'll be quick to write you up. And that's when you have to turn around and say, hey, you forced me onto this shift today. I told you, or I wrote in a report that I worked 3 doubles. I don't feel right today, but I still got mandated. I know people that did that worked a few doubles in a row and then said, hey, I don't know if I could do it today. I'm just tired. I don't want to fall asleep. And they mandated me. So they wrote a report saying, hey, listen, I don't feel well. I'd like to go to medical, but if you're not, for some reason, you're not sending me out to medical, because that's what I'm going to call for. I need a medical. But worst comes to worst, I'm writing a report to let you know that I'm not able to do this. But you put me in there. If something happens, I documented my concern. I told you that I wasn't feeling well. And I think another part of this all is how we help each other. I think at the end of the day is that if we have to come to work, we should come to work, unless there are reasons why we can't, obviously. And just realize that when you call off, it's going to affect somebody. That's the key. So just kind of be mindful of that. Hey, Connie, you have anything you want to say in closing?
I just want to say that we're all in this together. At the end of the day, we're all connected. We all depend on each other. And when one of us is not feeling right or not up to par, when one of us is absent, when one of us is kind of just not pulling our own weight, it impacts all of us. It impacts the entire system. It really does leave us vulnerable. And, I think from a management perspective, we have to start being a little more empathetic to that. I know that we're trying to meet our mandates. We're trying to get the numbers where we need them to be, because there's a liability if we don't. But the reality is that there's still a liability if we force someone to work who just doesn't have any more to give. So.
Well said. And again, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. Let's do what we can to get people into this profession, right incentives to invite, right incentives to keep. And when we look to mandate people, if we have to, quality over quantity. That's the key. How many times was this person drafted in a row? And are they able to do another one? You know, some people may be afraid to say no because they know if they say no, they could get charged. But that doesn't mean that they're able to do it. It just means that maybe someone should check. Maybe when you mandate somebody, we should physically see if they're okay to actually do the shift. Talk to them. You know, that's a good thing, because I'll tell you something now, especially those overnight shifts. You're going from a slow-moving shift to the first shift, which is a lot faster. That is extremely hard to do. Not even just the time frame of battling it out all night from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., but then having to, make it to 2 p.m. Again, if that's how the shift operates. But look where you're going from a shift that's slow to a shift that's fast. It's tough. It really is, especially when the shift is moving and now you're trying to have energy that you just don't have. And then most likely you're going to have to come back to work after trying to sleep in the afternoon. I mean, who can go home at 3 o'clock and sleep in the middle of the afternoon? It's hard. It's hard. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.